I never believed in the supernatural, let alone Christmas horror stories. But what happened to me last Christmas Eve changed everything. It was an experience that still haunts my nights and makes me dread the holiday season. The snowstorm that night was relentless, the wind howling like a chorus of banshees. I had just finished my shift at the diner and was eager to get home to my small apartment on the outskirts of town. My car struggled through the icy streets, the headlights barely penetrating the thick curtain of falling snow. When I finally reached the parking lot, I was relieved to see the familiar glow of the streetlights, casting long shadows across the snow-covered ground. As I made my way to the entrance, I noticed something odd. There were footprints leading up to my building, distinct against the otherwise undisturbed snow. They were deep, as if someone had been standing there for a while. I shivered, not just from the cold, but from a growing sense of unease. Who would be out in this weather? Pushing the thought aside, I hurried inside and climbed the stairs to my third-floor apartment. Once inside, I bolted the door, a habit formed more out of routine than necessity in our quiet neighborhood. I changed into warm clothes and made myself a cup of hot chocolate, hoping to shake off the chill that seemed to have settled in my bones. I turned on the TV to catch the evening news. The usual holiday cheer filled the screen, but my mind kept drifting back to those footprints. I decided to distract myself with some Christmas decorations. I retrieved a box from the closet and began hanging ornaments and tinsel on my modest tree. The act of decorating, usually comforting, felt strangely hollow that night. It was around midnight when the power went out. The apartment plunged into darkness, and the only sound was the wind howling outside. I fumbled for my phone and turned on the flashlight, the narrow beam cutting through the gloom. I tried the light switch, but there was no response. I sighed, figuring the storm had knocked out the power lines. I went to the kitchen to find some candles. As I lit them, I heard a soft knock at the door. I froze, the match burning down to my fingers. Who could be visiting at this hour, especially in such terrible weather? Another knock, louder this time. My heart pounded in my chest. Maybe it was a neighbor needing help. I approached the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. The hallway was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of emergency lights. I saw nothing at first, but then a shadow shifted. There was someone standing just out of view. "Who's there?" I called, my voice trembling slightly. No answer, just the wind outside and the creak of the old building. I hesitated, then decided to open the door a crack, keeping the chain lock in place. "Hello?" The figure stepped into view. It was a man, bundled in a heavy coat, his face obscured by a hood. His eyes, though, glinted in the dim light, unnaturally bright. He said nothing, just stood there, staring at me. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Still no response. The air grew colder, the chill seeping into my bones. I wanted to slam the door shut, but something held me back. A feeling that if I did, things would only get worse. Finally, the man spoke, his voice a rasping whisper. "May I come in?" Everything in me screamed to say no, but I found myself nodding. I unhooked the chain and opened the door wider. The man stepped inside, bringing with him a gust of freezing air. He didn't remove his coat or hood, just stood there, staring at my Christmas tree. "Nice decorations," he said, his voice still low and rough. "Thank you," I replied, unsure what else to say. "Can I get you something? Hot chocolate, maybe?" He nodded, and I moved to the kitchen, my mind racing. Who was this man, and why did I let him in? I glanced at my phone, wondering if I should call someone, but there was no signal. The storm had cut off everything. As I prepared the hot chocolate, I heard him moving around the living room. When I returned, he was sitting on the couch, looking at a photo of my family on the wall. "Your family?" he asked. "Yes," I said, handing him the mug. "That was last Christmas." He took a sip, then looked up at me. "Do you believe in the spirit of Christmas?" I nodded slowly. "I suppose so." He set the mug down and stood up. "Good, because tonight you're going to meet it." Before I could react, the lights flickered and then went out completely. The candles extinguished simultaneously, plunging us into darkness. I felt a hand grab my arm, icy cold and impossibly strong. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. The room seemed to spin, and I felt myself being pulled into the darkness, into a void where the air was frigid and the silence deafening. When I woke, I was lying on the floor of my apartment, the power back on and the candles still burning. The man was gone, but the sense of his presence lingered, a chill in the air that refused to dissipate. I checked the door. It was still locked from the inside. I never saw the man again, but every Christmas Eve, the power goes out at midnight. I hear the soft knock on the door and feel the cold seep into the room. I don't open the door anymore. I've learned to ignore the knocks, to let the spirit of Christmas pass by. But the fear remains, a reminder that some visitors bring more than holiday cheer. They bring the darkness with them, and sometimes they take a piece of you when they leave. I always enjoyed the solitude of winter in the mountains. My family's cabin, nestled in the heart of a dense forest, was my sanctuary. Each year I escaped the chaos of city life to spend a quiet Christmas alone, surrounded by nature's serene beauty. But last Christmas, the solitude brought more than peace, it brought terror. The drive up was uneventful. Snow blanketed the winding roads, and the evergreen trees stood tall and silent, like sentinels guarding an ancient secret. I arrived at the cabin just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the frozen landscape. The air was crisp and biting, and the only sound was the crunch of snow beneath my boots. Inside, the cabin was exactly as I remembered it, cozy, rustic, and inviting. I quickly got a fire going, the crackling flames bringing warmth and light to the dim interior. I unpacked my supplies, set up a small Christmas tree, and settled into the armchair with a cup of hot cocoa, feeling the tension of city life melt away. As night fell, the wind picked up, howling through the trees and rattling the windows. I wrapped myself in a blanket and listened to the storm outside, grateful for the sturdy walls and roof that protected me. It was a deep, primal comfort, one that made me feel safe and secure. But that night, something changed. I woke to a strange noise, a soft thudding sound that seemed to come from the front porch. At first, I thought it was the wind knocking something over, but as I lay there listening, the noise continued, rhythmic and deliberate. Curiosity and a growing sense of unease drove me to get out of bed and investigate. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously approached the front door. The thudding grew louder as I neared, and I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. I unlocked the door and opened it slowly, shining the flashlight onto the porch. There was nothing there, just the swirling snow and the dark forest beyond. I stepped outside, the cold air biting into my skin, and looked around. The noise had stopped, and there were no footprints in the fresh snow. I went back inside, bolted the door, and tried to shake off the feeling of unease. It was probably just an animal, I told myself. Maybe a branch had fallen. I returned to bed, but sleep eluded me. Every creak and groan of the old cabin seemed amplified, each sound a potential threat. The next day, I tried to put the incident out of my mind. I spent the day exploring the forest, taking photos, and enjoying the crisp winter air. But when night fell, the sense of unease returned. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I double-checked the locks and windows, ensuring everything was secure. I even set up a few makeshift alarms, pots and pans balanced precariously near the doors and windows, hoping the noise would alert me if anyone tried to break in. That night, the thudding sound returned, louder and more insistent. This time, it was accompanied by a faint scratching, like fingernails on wood. My heart pounded in my chest as I lay there, listening to the eerie sounds. I knew I couldn't ignore it. I got up, flashlight in hand, and crept to the door. The noises stopped as soon as I approached, and once again, there was nothing outside. The snow was undisturbed, the forest silent and still. I shone the flashlight around, but saw no signs of life. Frustrated and frightened, I went back inside. As I turned to close the door, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. There on the porch was a single red ornament, glittering in the flashlight's beam. It hadn't been there before. I picked it up, feeling a wave of dread wash over me. Who had put it there, and why? I tossed it back into the snow and shut the door, bolting it tightly. I didn't sleep at all that night, the fear gnawing at my mind. The next morning, I found more ornaments scattered around the cabin, hanging from tree branches, buried in the snow, even one inside the woodpile. Each one was a bright, cheery red, a stark contrast to the white snow and dark trees. It was as if someone was toying with me, trying to get inside my head. I decided I couldn't stay another night. I packed my things quickly, constantly looking over my shoulder, and loaded the car. As I drove away from the cabin, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a figure standing on the porch, a tall, shadowy figure that vanished as soon as I looked directly at it. The drive back to the city was a blur. My mind raced with questions and fears. Who or what had been at the cabin with me? I didn't believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but the experience defied any rational explanation. When I got home, I searched the internet for any similar stories, hoping to find some answers. What I found only deepened my fear. There were countless accounts of people experiencing strange, unexplainable phenomena in remote cabins, thudding noises, eerie figures, objects moving on their own. It seemed I was not alone in my terror. I haven't been back to the cabin since. Christmas, once my favorite holiday, now fills me with dread. I spend it with friends or family, never alone, always surrounded by people. But the fear remains, a dark shadow lurking in the corners of my mind. Every so often I'll find a red ornament on my doorstep, in my mailbox, even on my car. Each time it's a reminder of that night, of the terror I can't escape. I don't know what it wants or why it chose me, but I know one thing for certain. Some Christmas guests are not welcome. And once they find you, they never let go. Christmas has always been a time of joy and togetherness for my family. We gather at my grandmother's old Victorian house, a tradition spanning generations. Last Christmas, however, something sinister visited our holiday, and the memories still haunt me. Grandma's house is the epitome of holiday charm, with its antique decorations and warm, welcoming atmosphere. Every year we'd gather in the grand living room, the fireplace crackling, the tree glowing with hundreds of lights and ornaments. Last year was no different, at least not at first. It all started with the arrival of an unexpected Christmas card. We were sorting through the day's mail, a pile of holiday greetings from friends and relatives, when I found a plain white envelope at the bottom of the stack. There was no return address, just our family's name and Grandma's address written in an elegant, old-fashioned script. "Looks like someone went vintage this year," I joked, showing the envelope to my family. Grandma frowned, taking the envelope from my hand. "That's strange," she murmured, tracing the writing with a finger. "This handwriting looks familiar." She opened the envelope, revealing a single card inside. The front depicted a quaint winter scene, but it was the message inside that sent a chill through the room. The card read, "Beware the shadows of Christmas past. What was once buried must now be faced." There was no signature, no indication of who had sent it. My cousins laughed nervously, thinking it was a prank, but Grandma's face had gone pale. She quickly tucked the card back into the envelope and set it aside. "Probably just someone's idea of a joke," she said, forcing a smile. "Let's not let it ruin our Christmas." But the card's warning lingered in my mind. That night, as we sat around the fire, singing carols and sharing stories, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. The shadows cast by the flickering flames seemed to stretch and move of their own accord, creeping closer whenever I looked away. After everyone went to bed, I stayed up, unable to sleep. I decided to do some investigating. Grandma's house was filled with nooks and crannies, and if there was something to be found, it would be hidden in one of them. I started in the attic, a dusty space filled with old trunks and forgotten treasures. I opened the first trunk and found nothing but old clothes and photos. The second trunk was full of books and letters. It was in the third trunk that I found something unusual, a small wooden box, intricately carved and locked with a heavy brass clasp. The box was out of place among the other mundane items. Curiosity piqued. I took the box downstairs to the living room, hoping the firelight would help me examine it better. As I set it on the coffee table, I noticed Grandma watching me from the doorway. "What have you got there?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I found it in the attic," I replied. "Do you know what it is?" Grandma's face darkened. She crossed the room and sat beside me, her hands shaking as she reached for the box. "This belonged to your great-grandfather," she said quietly. "He was a man with many secrets." With a sigh, she produced a small key from around her neck and unlocked the box. Inside were old letters, yellowed with age, and a faded photograph of a young man standing next to a large, ominous-looking shadow. "That's him," Grandma said, pointing to the man. "And that shadow, it's the reason he left this world too soon." She explained that great-grandfather had been obsessed with the supernatural. He believed that he had encountered a malevolent spirit one Christmas Eve and had spent the rest of his life trying to understand and banish it. The shadow, he claimed, was not just a figment of his imagination, but a real entity that followed him, growing stronger each Christmas. As Grandma spoke, the room grew colder. The fire seemed to dim, and the shadows crept closer, as if drawn to the box and its dark secrets. Suddenly, the lights flickered and went out, plunging us into darkness. In the dim glow of the dying fire, I saw it, a tall, shifting shadow, darker than the night itself. It moved with purpose, creeping across the floor toward us. I felt a cold hand grip my heart, and my breath caught in my throat. "We need to close the box," Grandma whispered urgently. "It's the only way to stop it." I fumbled with the letters, trying to stuff them back inside. The shadow loomed over us, its presence suffocating. Just as it reached the coffee table, I managed to close the lid and snap the clasp shut. The room immediately warmed, the fire flared back to life, and the shadow vanished. Grandma and I sat in stunned silence, the reality of what we had just experienced sinking in. The card's warning echoed in my mind. What was once buried must now be faced. We never found out who sent the card, but we both knew it was a warning from beyond the grave. The box, with its dark legacy, was buried deep in the forest the next morning, far from the house and any prying eyes. Christmas will never be the same for our family. The shadows of the past had reached out to remind us that some secrets should never be uncovered. And each year, as the holiday approaches, I can't help but feel a shiver down my spine, wondering if the darkness will return to claim what it once lost.